Oh, you don't see mine yet. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Lit Talks from the Connecticut Literary Festival. I'm Joe Cimbarello. I'm the director of the festival, and I'm pleased to have you tonight here with our guests for publishing across genres and forms with Misha Shabali and Monica and Sam. They will be on screen in a second, and I will be off. But I want to tell you a little bit about Lit Talks. We've been doing this since the pandemic started. In 2020, our on-ground festival in Hartford was canceled. So we've been doing this with the generous support of the Connecticut Humanities. So thank you to CT Humanities. Tonight's program is also sponsored tonight by the Yale Writing Program down in New Haven. Yale is doing this June a series of online workshops. So if there's any writers out there, you can go to Yale Writers Workshop, search that, and there are workshops. And I think Misha is actually teaching one this year. I also want to thank our production supervisor, Christiana Torres, who makes it all work. In addition to, the festival is housed at Central Connecticut State University in New Britain. So thank you to everyone, and go Blue Devils. And of course, Real Artways, our on-ground partner, RJ Julia, our bookstore at the festival, and everyone else that helps support us. We have one more Lit Talk. It's coming up on the 22nd to celebrate National Poetry Month. The poet Jose Gonzalez will host 6 poets for a reading and a short conversation. So I hope you can join, just like you did this one. You go to our website and check it out. Our big news is we've had some meetings, and we are optimistic that with some masks and maybe 3 feet of distance, we can have an on-ground festival. So we are pleased to announce on October 23rd, we're going to return to Real Artways for our literary circus. It's not quite a book festival. We have installations, we have readings, we have food trucks. I think we're going to have a juggler or two this year too. So it's a lot of fun. It'll be October 23rd. Pray for good weather. Also at the festival, we publish books. We have a literary anthology. So any Connecticut residents out there, the first one came out. It was well received and rather handsome. And the deadline is April 15th for all you Connecticut writers out there, Monica. You can submit your poetry or prose online, and we're going to have a hell of a party on the 22nd of October. So please check that out also, and check us back on the 22nd. And please, if you can, help support the festival. All proceeds go right to the event and to our volunteer, mostly staff. But that's that. And tonight, it's about publishing in genres and forms. Please welcome Misha Shabali. He is a songwriter, a comedian, a storyteller, and an author. He was awarded the Dean's Fellowship at Fiction at Columbia University. His 6 Kindle singles for Amazon have all been bestsellers. I Swear I'll Make It Up to You, his first hardcover memoir, was released in 2016. And When We Were Animals, his 4th album, was released in 2018. Quite a Renaissance man. Misha, take it away.
Jotham, thanks so much for the intro, and thanks for letting me run the asylum for an evening here. I want to reach out to everybody at home and just say thank you so much for tuning in, for listening to us, for watching us, for being here. We know that there's a million different wonderful things like Pen 15 that are competing with us for your time. And we thank you for spending the evening with us. I'm super excited about the show we have for you tonight, the panel, the conference, whatever it is. Joining me in conversation tonight will be Monica Ong and Sam Talent. We've had, I sort of wish you could have all been privy to that common and everything in common. And I think we're with the 2 artists we've chosen tonight, we're sort of showing the entire span and spectrum of what the English language is capable of, what it means to construct a narrative, and what it means to forge your own path in publishing. These are both artists of tremendous will, sort of the kind of people where, when someone says, well, you can't do that, they come back and say, all right, well, give me 5 minutes. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to come back and show you. And I think that spirit is more important now than ever. It's always been important, but more now than ever. One of the things I want to focus on tonight too is, it's been a rough fucking year, man. It's been rough for all of us. I think that's universal across the board. Language is undiminished by the pandemic. the words that we use, the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we tell each other are the way we entertain ourselves, each other, the way we connect through language, through poetry, through prose, through songwriting. It's more important now than ever. We've never needed it so much. We've never needed each other so much through the medium of language. So one of the things I want to show you guys tonight is that language is still kicking, and that there is hope, not just for humanity, but also especially for artists. That the reason we keep paying into the lottery is because somebody wins, you know. And we have two people on the panel tonight who have absolutely won the lottery and done it on their own terms. First up is Sam Talent. I met Sam Talent a couple of years ago. He had a reputation that preceded him. I heard about him from other comics as really a comedian's comedian, just an assassin on stage. I was almost to discover this also. The opening pages of a novel, and I was further disappointed to discover that his novel was not just it didn't just not suck, it was fantastic. It was it was almost a finished work. Sam, I'm going to go ahead and read your bio here, and then I'll have you take it away with a selection of your readings, and then we'll have Sam read, and then we'll have Monica read, and then we'll do a Q&A. Oh, before I forget, at home, if you look in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, there's a view chat. You can talk about our hair, you can talk about our clothes, you can talk about our work. That's for you guys to sort of talk amongst yourselves. If you have a question you want to ask Sam or Monica or myself, or sort of just have us debate, the three of us, there's an ask a question link a little closer to the center from the chat button. If somebody asks the question that you want to ask, or you see a question come up that you're interested in having us answer, vote for it. Those questions will come to the top, and then when we do the Q&A after the brief readings here, we'll dive into the questions. First up is my friend Sam Talent. Sam Talent is a comedian. For the last decade, he has performed more than 40 weekends per year across America, Canada, and France. His writing has appeared in Birdie magazine and on Vice.com, and he's told jokes on Comedy Central, True TV, and Viceland. His acclaimed debut novel, Running the Light, has been heralded as the definitive book on stand-up comedy. He lives in Colorado with his wife and dog. Take it away, Sam.
Hey, thank you, Mishka. Good work. Mishka, of course, that comedian's comedian, which is code for not a commercial draw. So that's fun. Here we go, everyone. So I'm going to read a couple selections from my novel, Running the Light, which is about an old, broken down road dog comedian that he's not having a good time out there in the American Southwest. And then I'm going to read a couple things from some other stuff that I wrote. But here is just a snippet of what it feels like when you're doing very good on stage. What he lacked in innovation, he made up for in execution, tenacity, and volume. He operated with a defiant nonchalance that concealed his craft beneath a layer of manufactured effortlessness. He'd been doing this, for so long that after a certain indefinable tipping point, he had them, he owned them, and it no longer mattered what words he said, only how he said them. The funny was in the timing, the pronunciation, the spaces in between. He wove in and out of prepared material, riffing at his leisure and working the crowd. He was excellent, an emancipator, a prophet, the microphone a relic in his hand. For the duration of his set, his was the only voice in the world. Santeria, cult ritual, jokes as incantations. What he said altered the listener, caused them to revert and devolve. They howled and grunted. They whooped. They squealed. Under his spell, they communicated without words, slapping at each other like lesser hominoids. Some cried, the joy welling up and escaping their eyes in the form of clear liquid, and running down their faces gone sore from smiling prolonged. For 58 minutes, Billy Ray Schaefer harnessed the protean, giving shape to that which has no form. It was a masterful performance that left the crowd liberated and buckling like convulsives. But for Billy Ray, while his attention was occupied, he operated autonomous of a sense of pride. While he was killing, Billy Ray Schaefer was completely and hopelessly bored. He checked his watch. He thought about dinner. This task brought him joy no longer. He didn't hear the laughter anymore. So that's fun and uplifting. Next up, we, just a lot of good times in this books. Pretty much there's Billy Ray in the book, and then there's the crowd. And like most comedians who aren't making enough money to justify their loneliness, he's not a big fan of the crowd. He kind of hates them. So here's 2 quick passages about how he sees the unwashed masses. Billy Ray had never been here before, but observing these people, he understood where he was. He knew them. He'd met them many times. Proud, generous, unremarkable, their faces big and red and tired. These were capital A Americans, the ubiquitous, stalwart, forgotten surplus. They would die here because they were born here, baptized and married in the same church, living the span of their lives within 50 miles of where they'd been pushed screaming into the world. These people populated towns that only existed on maps: Tama, Iowa, Demopolis, Alabama, Wyoming et al., the faceless spaces between destinations. They spent their lives persevering, aware that they were waiting for something, but for what? They didn't know. And this is a guy bringing him on stage to perform for a bunch of rich people. Please join me in welcoming a legendary comedian. He sat on the couch next to Johnny Carson. Here he is, Billy Ray Schaefer. His name, his burden. Billy Ray breathed in, breathed out, and pushed open the door, crossing the space between the door and the microphone, as well as the infinite space in his head, the space between who he was and who he had been. He stared out at the group of drunk men slapping their thick palms together in welcome. Their faces disappeared. Unbeknownst to them, in the moment, he removed the microphone from the stand. They were no longer individuals. They were unified, combined. In his presence, they were reborn, melted down into a single organism, the crowd, the faceless beast with countless mouths, its 100 eyes pregnant with expectation. Feeding time, you monster. I hope you gorge till you choke. So yeah, he's a real hit at parties. So this was, writing a book for me was like really just hearing all my friends call me pretentious and acting like they didn't know I knew all the words I used. So it was really tough for me to like write stuff writerly, for lack of a better term. And this is a passage right here where I really felt like I figured out that I was, writing and not just slapping words onto a screen. On the cusp of winter, after autumn, but before the real cold sets in, the sky in Denver is a window pane that glows with a pale indigo radiance, a pink-silver vaginal color that grows darker towards the edges of the frame. When he thought of Denver, he thought of this color and that sky. It was as much a part of the city to him as the mountains to the west. Being under that sky was the closest he got to a sense of connectedness, of belonging. That sky was the color of home. Tonight the sky was black. Tonight a veil of weak clouds stretched the heavens like thumbprints, blotting out the stars and dampening the moonlight and turning the sky into a hole through which the world fell. Staring up at it gave him anxiety, as if he might float away and be consumed by the big black nothing above. He didn't feel good. His legs were sore and his back was coiled with knots from his tailbone to the base of his skull. His eyes burned with poor sleep and his fingers were yellow. It had been some time since he drank a glass of water, longer since he'd ate something green. The reflection of his face in the rear view was hideous and foreign. This is who I am now. Maybe I've reached my final form. So yeah, what a freak. And here's 2 passages. I got like 3 minutes left of some stuff that I've been working on. This is an unpublished. This is my second novel, which will be another commercial success, I'm sure. This is about a guy who just smoked some DMT and he's not having a good time. So this is his hallucination. He is running without shoes, faster than his tendons, faster than the sun. He is running from something older than him, older than anything he knows, trampling alfalfa in his retreat. The stalks whisper as they snap, "Oh, honey. Oh, sweetheart." There is a clearing followed by water, and when he dives, he is on horseback, and his hair is a whipping tail. The horse is his, and he is the horse, and he is afraid of nothing, and he leaps, and when he lands, he is wearing pelts that smell of fresh brain, a berserker, a pilgrim, howling as he runs. He stops to swing his bone club, and where it lands, there is life no longer, and he understands he is not fleeing the older thing, he is the older thing, and the light runs away, and the ground disappears, but instead of falling, he hurtles forward, caught up in it all, and he is clutching the bob of the pendulum that swings to the edges of himself. The pendulum slows at the perimeter, slows long enough for him to see outside of himself, beyond the edge, where high chromatic waterfalls spill and divide into many golden ponds. In the reflection of each small lake, he can see his face is different there. In each pool where his face should be, there is the face of a lion, or an eagle, or a mandrill, more animals than he has names. They still have all their teeth. The pendulum freezes like love at the zenith of it all, and he looks down below to see beasts in legion clawing at the wall, climbing each other, rising in mewling snarl. Scrambling hooves craved foothold in a bed of spines and skulls. He could hear their bones grinding, the wet popping of compacted brains. Countless horns and infinite teeth, ripping and tearing and opening and fucking the wounds. A fat white bird with tendon dangling from its beak calls to him from the eye socket of a fallen rhino. "Oh, honey, oh, sweetie, if you think this is bad, just you wait. And there is every kind of blood, all of the blood in the world. Steam rises. Every bit of the other side of him is drenched in blood, copious lacquer, thick enough to keep out the errant rays of the light of life. In the mess, babies are born dead. He watches a dying giraffe calve along Billy as wolves tear at her legs. The kid emerges like a sack of pearls, dangling like a bead of sweat on the lip of God, before plummeting into a lurking murder of sharp birds, alive long enough to scream and fall and break its neck and be consumed, just like everything else." So yeah, I don't know if you guys ever done drugs, but not always a good time. And then this is from an Audible original that should be coming out soon. If Andrew, if you're watching, why don't you hit me up? This is from a thing called Heroes. So here we go. He can't see anything, but he knows he is lying down. The dirt beneath him is cold. He can't hear the men around him stop shouting, but he can feel the weight of the sudden collective nothing. His head fills with liquid and is warmer than water. He can hear his heart. The rhythm goes slow. It's not darkness that he sees. It is light, brilliant light, like blindness, like the idea of light, the light of life itself. There is nothing in the light because the light is everything, and he is not afraid because he knows this, and he is grateful to have this knowledge. But then he can see it, see a woman, see her by the ocean beneath the moon, and she is surrounded by strangers, by beings, surrounded by people he only knows as ideas, surrounded by anarchists and Buddhists and men with long hair, and they are chanting, these people, they sing to her and about her because she is an angel, and so are they. And when they aren't singing, they worship each other because they are Indians and cowboys and saints with long fingers, and they survive on pineapples and holy water, and they eat each other at sunrise, and they make love instead of pain because she is radiant, this woman. She is transcendent, his sister, and she lives this way forever beneath this other side of the moon. All right, so that's my time, everyone. I'm selling t-shirts after the show. If you want to buy my book, go over to samtalent.com, and I'm going to kick it back to your host and MC, Misha Shabali, everyone.
Sam.
Oh, good. Mishka's frozen again.
I'm happy to hear that you're writing new material.
Monica, is he breaking up for you too?
I see Sam. I see you fine. I don't see Monica. I wonder if we're having.
Well, yeah, it sounds like you're at the bottom of a well.
All right. I wonder. Okay. Monica, it looks, I don't see you yet, but Christiane is telling me that you're ready to go.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay.
All
right.
So Sam and I know each other. So when we decided to set up this panel, there was, you know, a little bit of concern on our end that it would be just sort of Sam and I yammering on like the two old guys on the Muppet Show, until Jotham introduced us to Monica's work, at which point our concern about us yammering on too much flipped to concern that this would just turn into us fanboying Monica, because her book, I think, you know, just floored both of us. That, you know, it's sort of like dogs and coyotes. We've recognized our natural enemy here, a real writer. striking fear into our insecure hearts. So Monica, we feel so happy to have you with us, and damn, you make us look like hacks. Here is Monica's official state sanctioned bio.
This is very artistic, having a silent bio.
The Rhode Island School. The Temple Contemporary Gallery. Are you guys able to hear me?
You're lagging, brother.
All right. All right. It seems like I'm having difficulties, so we're going to skip the rest of Monica's bio. And Monica, I'm just going to turn it over to you cold and try and refresh my screen and see if that works.
No worries at all. No worries at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to screen share, and hopefully this will work. Are you all seeing what I'm seeing? Yes?
Yes.
I am not yet. Oh,
I see
there
it
you
now.
are.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm actually so delighted to be here in your company. You know, as a visual poet, you know, I definitely had an unconventional path to writing myself. In fact, my collection, Silent Anatomies, emerged from a series of art installations, like the one you see here of these medicine bottle poems. And in my artwork, I was often, you know, trying to find ways to write about cultural anxieties. And the medicine bottle poem I'm going to share tonight is one that I wrote to kind of begin conversations about taboo topics in my community. And it was actually my Aunt Juanita who gave me the courage to write about mental health. And it was her ghost who was really my muse in the making of this book. So this poem is called Silent Treatment. Silent Treatment. Suggested use. If you want to forget me, simply leave me upstairs alone in my metal chair. Pretend I had an accident by a swimming pool. Tell them I am possessed by spiritos when I converse with the white curtains by the window. Erase my name from all the books in the house and refer to me in the past tense. The cycle of ginseng, ramen, and Haldol doesn't end. My skin has grown green, my face is now long forgotten. How long will you be able to save yours? Okay. So a lot of my work, you know, often injects a personal narrative into science-inspired objects. And so this poem that you're looking at right now is a CT scan portrait of my father titled Corona Mestiza. Corona Mestiza, Alejandro, my father, Amoy mustache. 1968, Chicago was winter when you came, year of the butterflied brain. And Truongju, who forgot his zapatos in San Juan, boy, dreaming. Study 1, surname, Ong, pesos for pesos, pesos for papers from the dead. Your father passing as Pinoy, selling hammers on Ongpin Street where conquistadors danced with Elvis. Here, they scan you all the time. 1, 0, 1, no. 0, no. 1, never quite able to. 1942 and 1977, both of us year of the serpent, skins shedding. Father, we were born to play tricks on the mind. And for those of you who are geographically gifted, you'll notice that the lesions on this brain form the Philippine Islands, which was my father's birthplace and the refuge that his parents fled to during the Second War. The collection also features many poems that are made from medical diagrams. And this diagram of the nerves, in a sense, became mother-like branches where daughter-like birds touch and go. This poem is called Innervation. Deep in the interior division, mother's words nest. One eye open, one eye closed, because I am raw, all red inside. Shame as communicants, we open up on each other's walls, sympathetic, but never in the same room. Blood is thicker than water. I waited for her, still do. There is a way to cultivate birds from torn things, find oceans in empty seats, her heavy door. How do her words weigh on these muscular branches? You have to collect and select. Cutaneous gall, tiny hands cup sand and blue sea glass, anterior to the outbreak of war, yet we sleep best under each other's skin. And let's see, you'll see, this is just a behind the scenes look at the process of producing this poem as a letterpress broadside, which I did in collaboration with Dexterity Press here in New Haven. You know, what I really liked about working in this multimodal way was that it really helped open up opportunities for me to do events like Unsilencing Anatomies, which was hosted a few years ago in Tucson, Arizona. And it was a citywide public installation, you know, organized in a tour of 20 stops along the trolley line there. And each stop featured a range of poetry events, exhibitions, cultural centers, and health resources that addressed cultural silences that were made visible. And what I loved about this was bringing poets together with medical humanities students and public health professionals to engage local communities in conversations about various health topics, while also advocating for the importance of diverse contemporary literature as a resource for cultural competence in community health. So I do want to share you know, some newer work that I've been working on. Oops, let's see here. Here we go. During the pandemic, I've been in the midst of producing a new series of astronomy-inspired works that try to write the sky from a female perspective. So this is a constellation poem that is built upon a map of the Milky Way, and it's called The Way of Milk. The Way of Milk. Our palms burn into a soft bearing, elegy as snow behind the eyes. Serpent scars bloom. Pedro, please, swan dive. Weave us Kundiman rings of red moon water. Asuncion, her clarion call, a blood song heart. Alejandro, wing spread, Marietta somewhere behind. Death's fog overtaking us all. Wake me honest, sting of entry. The heavens below this line cannot be seen from the latitude of longing. What touch survives? Alters interior oceans as wolves roam a new norm. Trifecta of nearby grass, centaurs, each of us, migrant paradise. Plant my mother's lanterns in the heavens on this earth, this breath we all share. And what I did with this constellation poem was I printed it on Duratrans, which was mounted in acrylic into the sort of like light box installation in this wooden box, and it also includes these dried botanicals. And actually, the orange bloom you see is actually a Chinese lantern plant that my mom actually did grow. So finally, I want to end this set with, oops, sorry, with a poem that plays with design. So my day job is, working as a designer, and I was really interested in playing with Oliver Burns' take on Euclid's first 6 books of Elements, in which he used colored graphics to explain principles of geometry. And so I wanted to do a riff on that, and I use the triangle to spotlight the astronomer Vera Rubin. So this piece is called The Book of Vera. The Book of Vera. In the mid-1960s, Vera Rubin was granted access to San Diego's prestigious Palomar Observatory, an old boys' club so infamous astronomers called it the monastery. Though she could use the telescope, Rubin was informed that there was nowhere for her to relieve herself. The facility had no women's restroom. To enter a room is to perforate the stark white page, optical precision sharp as the inner edge of arms wide open. I was a girl born to be a shadow. The first point is to begin, to split open the fiber of the field, cut your teeth on curved starlight in lonely work. What does it feel like to be the only, where none before you came? The second is to pivot, steady the blade as far as you can go. They will keep telling you not to go there, that the room has no room. Notice how the doors are spelled, how distant. How did you do it with 4 moons in your orbit? Their little bodies call you by your other name, Mother. A generous garden that spreads forth onto long, wide tables. As the pulp of years give way to the shape of genius, you make a turn, circumnavigate a single point. Your sun's gown pours onto the hot glass, tilted towards a spectra of galaxies, burning. Spirals of testimony agree with you about the missing girls, unseen hands that knead the dough, fold the cloth, hold us all down. Their resistance, a safeguard from the senseless spinning out of sight. I slip your triangle into the lining of my inner pocket. Beneath this concentrated scowl, I am a girl searching for the observatory bathroom, echoing the hallway where you firmly pressed onto the door, a cutout paper skirt and said, "There you go. Now you have a ladies' room." So thank you for also having me here tonight. I did want to share, I know like my work, sort of meeting the public wouldn't have been possible without all these wonderful, literary magazines and also independent presses who really welcome, innovative and experimental writing. And as an offering to all of you who came tonight, I am going to be sharing with you my hybrid lit list, which is a list of literary magazines that are interested in interdisciplinary and hybrid writing. And so I know the festival will make this available, but you can also find it on my website at monicaong.com. And hopefully it'll also be a tool for those of you who want to have some adventures in publishing. So thank you so much.
Monica, thank you so much. That was fantastic. It's funny because I was sort of writing a couple of notes about the questions that I wanted to ask and talk about the ways in which your work and Sam's work is sort of interconnected. And one of the things that or one of the ways of looking at your work and the way in which with Sam's work, I feel at times like there's a mask at work because he's writing fiction. And I was thinking about the way that the author's self is revealed through the work. And the analogy that I made for your work was a constellation. before I knew that you were going to be talking about constellations and, from anatomy to astrology. I don't know exactly how to phrase this question. Reading this book and not knowing you, I became wildly curious about you as a writer, as a person, as a psyche, as a sort of an authorial entity. And I felt like you were sort of salting clues for us throughout the narrative. Do you want to talk a little bit about your personal relationship or yourself to your work? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I definitely, when I started Silent Anatomies, it was really, it started out kind of as a family history project in a sense. I was interviewing relatives and I was going through a lot of archives, in my, of my parents' photographs. And what I kept finding was that the images that I would find, often had a lot of secrets in them that weren't obvious in the images. And I found that in order to kind of unpack them, that was why sort of like writing and poetry started to become integral. And so my work started to become, more involved in poetry, because I primarily before Silent Anatomies, I was doing like kind of installation art, and a lot of my work was often like in fragments and such, and what happened was that I met other writers who were kind of like, I think you're trying to write a book. Like, I think you're trying to this is also trying to be poetry, but you don't realize it yet, And I found that poetry was a way to weave, all these sort of disparate, fragments together. And in a way, kind of, because also I, before, like in my early part of my art career, I was also a painter. So it was also kind of like a painterly way of building a narrative that wasn't linear, but that kind of like the impressionism, that as like stroke by stroke, you would start to gain, an impression of, the sort of cultural landscape and the interior landscape that the work sits in. So I don't know if I'm answering your question the best way, but definitely, like, I have a very non-linear process, that's for sure.
Well, it strikes me that you use poetry as sort of an archaeological tool to unearth things about your past, your family's past, your history, imagined histories, these, and then the sort of silenced histories, the things that that you don't know.
That's right. Absolutely. Like, especially like, as for example, the book opens with a photograph, of my mom and her siblings. And, whenever I sit down and talk to her about these images, she keeps telling me these things that I'm always like, why didn't you tell me this? Because in the photograph, she's disguised as one of the boys in the photograph. And this was because my grandfather was like so ashamed of having had so many daughters, and again, just, my parents were the kind of people where they weren't talkative. Like honestly, like in doing this project was how I learned, all these random things about my family. Like there was a medicine bottle in the book where, there's like this mystery uncle that I never knew about as a kid, but my grandparents actually adopted him. And the mythology was that adopting boys would attract, give more fertility, like for more sons, and when we did research for this book, we actually did locate him, and I got to meet him. And so again, it was this, and it was again, like writing was also this entry point where I started to develop a relationship with my parents I never had, because again, they weren't very vocal people. And so it was kind of this vessel to kind of like not only open up this history, but actually it opened up a different way of relating, to my family as well. So yeah, it was really a lot of discoveries.
Sam, when thinking about your work, I had this experience sort of happen again and again when I was trying to turn people onto your book. And then, we have friends in common, or I would, was traveling to Colorado and I said, oh, you got to meet Sam Talent. And people would say, well, after reading the book, I'm not sure that I want to, which is which is interesting. I mean, it's the premise of fiction is that you're writing someone who is not you, but by writing the character of Billy Ray Schaefer as detailed and as specific as you have, it's like readers have forgotten the premise of fiction, that the writer is not the protagonist. So I would ask you, what damn it, man, you're a comedian, where did you get so arrogant to think that you could write a novel? And where did it come from? How did you do this?
Well, I mean, I just wrote a book. I mean, Monica amalgamated all types of different like art forms and stuff. And Monica, your stuff rules. I'm glad I went first. I wouldn't want to follow you. It's like following Earthquake or Bruce. I don't know, man. Like, I was lonely. I was in Vegas. I didn't have any friends, really. My wife did her first 2 years of med school out there, and I always wrote short fiction, but writing a novel wasn't something that I could do because I was too busy, like, smoking weed and playing grab ass with my friends in Denver. But the isolation led me to just sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day because I couldn't go outside. It's a million degrees there. And also, I'm lucky that I don't have a college degree. I'm not like very educated, and I don't have an MFA or anything. So all the things that I think people are taught they need to do in order to publish a book or, follow whatever traditional paths there are for writing, I didn't have those impediments. So I just sat down and wrote and did my best not to rip off Graham Greene or Dennis Johnson too hard. But I've always just read a bunch and just imitating the stuff that I've read and trying to make it more and more unique and sound more and more like my own organic voice. I don't know, man. I mean, I just needed more merch to sell. Like, the t-shirts weren't moving, so I thought a book was good.
One of the things that keeps coming to mind is West Virginia songwriter and performer Hazel Adkins, who heard like, Elvis Presley on the radio and didn't understand that he was hearing a band, that he was, hearing a multi-track performance. He thought that it was one person who was doing it all. So he learned to do everything at the same time. Right. I think one of the things that you benefited from not getting an MFA, from not, studying fiction specifically, is nobody gave you those bullshit talks about, oh, it's really hard, kid, you'll never make it, or how difficult it is to write a novel, to publish a novel, to self-publish a novel, to self-publish a successful novel. Since you didn't have anyone telling you that it was impossible, you just fucking did it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't know better, and that's the same way with stand-up or with my band. Like, we were all DIY. I've always made my own merch. We used to make our own CDs. I booked all my own tours. I don't have an agent or a manager. So just doing the thing and not worrying about what happens to the thing once it's done is, I think, important. And yeah, I'm lucky that I didn't, have anyone telling me to do something differently. I mean, Mishka, you were the one who told me to do everything I did and helped me. I mean, your influence and your leadership was like, I don't know, man. No one really looked out for me the way you did. So I'm just incredibly grateful.
I'm incredibly grateful that you wrote the book that you did. I mean, I remember reading the slush pile at the New Yorker and just going through like story after story after story. And it's so hard to write well. It's so hard to create something new. It's so hard to create something that really like, makes you like sort of storm out of your office. Like, wow, like that got me so excited. And to read something that sort of came to me cold and to see life in it, it was so exciting.
Well, that's how I was when I got Monica's book. When we found out that we were going to be in this together, I ordered your book and I was like, good God, this is some otherworldly shit. I had never seen anything like that, dude. Like, Monica, it really blew my mind. It was kind of like taking drugs, honestly. And I think that's so rare, especially
There's
as a great reader of literature.
Right.
Yeah. Like, it just really blew my doors off, man. So way to go.
I want Sam to blurb my next book.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And it's just cool because I don't get this. Like, I don't literature hasn't embraced me. So it's just really exciting for me to talk to fans of reading and like other authors, It's This just rules. I'm just so fired up for this right now.
Well, it's what was really fun for me was sort of connecting the dots between the two of you with sort of roots in like RISD, Rhode Island, Lightning Bolt, and also DIY not as an affectation or oh, we want this to appear DIY,
Right.
but out of this thing, you know, this shape doesn't exist, so I will invent it.
Yeah.
I will make it myself. You know, with Monica's stuff, it's like sort of conservation of mass. You know, that these silenced voices had so much energy that now there's actually a physical manifestation. It's not just words on the page. It's not just a voice. There's actually a thingness to it. You know, it's like these voices were held back for so long that then when they manifested, it actually came out as an object.
Yeah, well, and actually, you know, to Sam's point too, like, so I didn't get an MFA in writing at all either. I was like an art school kid. And so every time when I set out to make something, I'm always in this sort of design thinking maker mode. And I always have an idea, and I'm kind of seeing it as also not just a story, but also an encounter, you know, like designing the encounter for the person and trying to find the form that best supports the kind of story, you know, that I want to tell. And yeah, and early on when I was, you know, trying to send work out, it was daunting because you'd get journals that are like, it's got to be, Times New Roman, 12 points and no pictures. And, you know, and you're kind of like, whoa, like, is there going to be a place for this? But I think luckily, you know, I think I encountered, and I think, you know, RISD has that culture of like, well, whatever, like, if it's not out there, just make it anyway. You know, if it's not out there, you know, you get together with people, you figure out, you find your audience, you know, like you meet them where they're at. Don't worry about trying to get like, and I think the other thing too was really being clear about like, not chasing prestige for the sake of that, right? That, you know, the whole idea of being experimental is that it's not been done before, right? And it's not always recognizable. So it's more of like, for me, it was about finding a process of making in which the making itself was its own reward, right? And being more excited about taking a creative risk and trying to do something bold and different, rather than like, oh, is this gonna, you know, be, you know, rewarded something, you know, like kind of like that. I mean, it's great when that happens, and of course it helps. But to me, it was like that wasn't, you know, I made sure it wasn't the number one driving factor, but it was more about, for me, the spirit of experimentation. And what's really funny is that, you know, as when you start kind of, when you decide on that and you start going down that route, suddenly more and more literary magazines were like, hey, we're looking for hybrid work. And suddenly editors were emailing saying, hey, we're looking for more, you know, multimedia work, you know, what can you send us? So I think sometimes it's like, you have to build it first, right? And then I think, you know, then the doors kind of start opening.
Monica, several people have asked, in your creative process, what comes first, words or images? Do they happen together? Is there sort of synchronicity? Do they feed off each other? Does it change from time to time?
So, you know, it depends on the story, but a lot of times, you know, so I'm always looking. I'm one of those people where, you know, whether I'm at a flea market, I'm cruising images online, I'm looking through old books, I'm just always looking and thinking about, you know, how can I make something that really challenges the conventions of reading? And with like the medical diagrams, I remember I was like at a vintage market looking, and someone was selling, you know, a lot of really cool vintage diagrams. And I looked at it and I just said, you know, I want to make that into a poem. I don't know how, but I want to, you know, and so sometimes and I think too, what I love about unconventional structures too is that it challenges like this idea of linearity we have about reading, like, you know, top down, left to right, right? And so what I liked about like maps and diagrams was that when you make a poem there's no one really telling you where to start reading it, right? Like that you can go around it, you can read it left, right, up, down, back, you know, backwards. So it was just, sometimes I'll see something that catches my eye. But then at the same time, you know, I'll also, you know, like with Vera Rubin's story, you know, like when she cut out that skirt and was like, no, I'm gonna I'm gonna make this a ladies' room, right? I was thinking about like that shape, So again, I was just like thinking about like design history and like what would be the right kind of design that would support that story. So I think sometimes the images, like if I'm working with my parents' images, they'll inspire something. But I would say it's half and half, really. That sometimes it's a compelling story too that that launches my sort of hunt for interesting visual, prompts.
Can I ask Monica a question?
Sure.
Yeah, jump in.
So Monica, like I've been doing stand-up and comedy since like 2005. And when I told my friends that I was working on a novel, a lot of them just rolled their eyes and they were like, oh, because I'm good at stand-up. People like my stand-up. And did your design friends, like, did they embrace this new thing that you were doing and encourage you? Or were they kind of weary of you moving into poetry and combining it with your previous design experience?
I think a lot so what's interesting about the design people that I know is that like everybody has a side gig, it's like, there's like, I know a lot of designers who are like, and I have a band on the side, and I have this crazy company I'm starting on the side. So the side gigging, seems pretty natural. I think for me what I wanted to do more of was to like find more like poet friends, because
Yeah.
I think for me was like, was just like finding that mentorship and finding people that I could sort of share work with. So I think finding community actually is really important. And for me, like in 2009, I joined Kundiman, which is an organization that fosters Asian American writers and poets. But at the same time, I started going to like poetry things and again, there were poets like Randall Horton, who teaches at University of New Haven, and Wendy Walters, who's at Columbia, who kind of took me under their wing a little bit, and just really encouraged me and said, "Look, don't worry if your work looks like anyone else's. Don't worry if your career path looks like anyone else's. It doesn't matter. What's important is that." Your relationship with your audience, and you having your own reason, for making the work that you make. And I think, and that's the thing is, I think if for me, it was all about like, we have to find our tribe. We have to find the support systems that can help us, grow the work that we want to grow. And what's really great is, again, too, like my work is, it's the kind of thing where it's very niche, but like the niche audience that it found is like fiercely like loyal and wonderful. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And so that's such a rewarding part of it.
Sam, I remember seeing you in Vegas when you were in the middle of writing this novel, and I felt like I was dealing with a friend who was sort of like going through a period of hard drinking or drug addiction or something, where like I just had to let you get to the end of it. Like I could tell that you were down the well while you were there, but I felt like there was nothing I could do to help you or to speed it along, but I just sort of had to like let you continue to suffer until the suffering was done. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like when you were writing this book, you were writing against a lot of obstacles, one in that I think you felt that you weren't qualified to do the work that you were doing, and also getting continually ribbed and roasted by your friends for being a pretentious writer.
Correct. They don't know how to use the word pretentious. It's the only issue.
So I am imagining you as sort of a Dr. Frankenstein in the high lonely tower, putting this new being together.
You mean creating an abomination? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, sure. But my question for you is this: at what point did you realize that the monster was going to live? At what point did you realize that it was actually going to work? I mean, I feel like you were really sort of laboring alone in solitude with very little encouragement. And so it was just that you didn't have a community? At what point? Why did you keep going? Why didn't you give up? Did you almost give up? You know?
No, I mean, I knew the book was very good. I felt like what I was doing, the work, like Monica said, like the work was the reward, you know? Like I would finish after writing all day and read over what I wrote the next day and be like, okay, that's good. Like you're figuring it out. You're crafting. The issue for me with writing is that I'm a comedian first, and my brain has been formed by nights on stage being immediately gratified by the crowd's response. Like I know moment to moment, word by word on stage, if I am doing my job and the crowd is laughing, or if I'm bombing and failing. And with writing, you're alone and you don't know if you're wasting your time, and there's no validation. And that difference in feedback was so strange and alien to me that I kind of just had to believe in myself, which luckily I bet on myself a lot throughout my career, and typically I've trusted my gut and it's paid off. But I mean, I will disagree with you in saying that I didn't feel like I wasn't qualified, because I think that I read a lot of books. I read a lot of contemporary fiction, and it's, first of all, it's really hard to write a book for sure, but a lot of it's also very bad. And I would read books and be like, well, this person got published. Well, I'm better than this. My book has an ending. You know, I'm not so up my own ass sentence by sentence like the person that I just read was. So I was very much like, I don't know. The whip of seeing what else was going on around me was like cracking on my back, and I could feel that I was like the mule pulling this story forward, and I didn't feel like I was wasting my time.
Whenever I ask you about your writing or why you write or why you write the way you do, you always steer it back to reading and to the authors that you've read. We've got a question here. In Running the Light, you thanked your mom for teaching you to read, and you thanked your dad for teaching you what to read.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit and talk about the difference between the two or how those play off each other?
Yeah, my mom sat me down and I learned how to read with my mom at a very early age. Like that book, I'll Love You Forever, with the little kid on the toilet at the beginning of it. Like that book where it's just about her, like the mom dying in the end and he has to hold her. It's a heartbreaking book for a child to learn. So my mom and my Aunt Julie taught me the ins and outs of like how to read, because my Aunt Julie's a librarian and reading was a big deal in my house. But then once I hit a certain age, my dad was such a hipster that he kind of looked at me as a new person that he could expose to all the different kinds of media that all of his friends had already seen. So like Clockwork Orange at an early age, you know, the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, very cool music. And then also that trickled down to, you know, like Geek Love and the works of Larry Brown and, you know, Read Jesus' Son. Like my dad was so influential in all the different cool things that I've adopted as my personality that just reek of him. Like the stink of my father's influence is all over me. So my dad trusting me and being like, hey, you should read The Road. Like, I know that you're a boy, but you should probably read The Road by Cormac McCarthy. A lot of other dads wouldn't tell you what to read. It was cool. So that's what I meant by that. Like my mom taught me how to read, and my dad was like, well, these are the things that you should read. And I'll always be grateful for him, because then you got to figure out what you like based on those influences, and kind of, you know, Larry Brown reads you to William Gay, leads you to Barry Hannah, leads you to all the different freaks, you know. So yeah, that's what that meant.
We're gonna have to wrap up here soon. Monica, if you have words of advice or inspiration or wisdom that you would share with people who are sort of on the other side of what you've done, people who are about to get the idea for their Silent Anatomies, what would you advise a young Monica to do and not to do?
Well, you know, I think one thing, and this is something I pulled from, you know, kind of my art school background, was to think about things like, you know, rejection and failure as actually like opportunities to grow and to learn, and that Because the thing is that, like, for example, in design thinking, you have to throw out like 20 bad ideas before you get to something interesting, right? And also, when you put stuff out in art school or to a design client, like, you're gonna get no, like the first 2 or 3 times, and that's totally fine, right? Like, I think it's one of those things where, for me, if I set forth to do something, understand that that's par for the course, but also that, if I can park my ego at the door and go into the studio and just really focus on what really drives me, and so, like, when I ask myself, like, why am I making this, why am I doing this, at the end of the day, for me, it's about, how can I encourage that, like, one person who's going to read this, who's probably feeling as lost as I am. Like, honestly, like, that's one of the questions I'm really asking when I go to making something. And, yeah. And I think, and I think also the other thing is, asking myself, like, what is the creative risk, I can take in doing this, but also, how can I set up a creative life and a sustainable one, that's also joyful, right? Because again, it's like, to me, like, I try to not buy into the sort of, like, tortured creative story, because we forego a lot to be able to do what we do. So if you're going to do it, you might as well have fun, and you might as well make sure that you pick people around you who are going to nourish you and support you in that as well. So yeah, I think that's, as Sam had mentioned, it's like believing in yourself, but also having a lot of self-compassion so that you can push past, any challenges or setbacks and just keep going.
That was fantastic. I mean, particularly well taken. I sort of winced when you said it. The enjoy it, find joy in what you do. I heard too hard and too well, that you need to suffer for your art, and I keep defaulting back to that, and that's not true. Creation can be joyful,
Mm-hmm.
and you're allowed to have fun. Sam, what about you? What would you advise a younger version of yourself of what to do, what not to do, when going through this process of that huge hurdle of creating your first book?
I just think that with, artists in general, or people who want to pursue selfish, creative lives, just be okay with being uncomfortable. Like, whether that means not having any money, not having health insurance, not owning a nice new phone, not owning the best new gaming system, sleeping in what amounts to a flop house. Like, there's all these people who do things for security, and they think that later on in life they will be able to, be safe, and they'll be able to create later. And I really don't think that I don't know, I'm only 33, but I feel like I'm going to get less creative as I get older, and I'm going to get less hungry, and I'm going to be less inspired. So I think that you should just be okay with being, first of all, afraid, not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, because the ingenuity that comes with, like, poverty and the fear of not knowing any sense of security is it's good. It's good for you as a young person who wants to create. And, I don't think you're going to actually be jealous of your friends who own houses at 27, because you're going to have cool friends like this and get to do really, just validating stuff, like talk to you and Monica and have, I don't know. I know so many kids who are like, yeah, I want to go on the road, but also I have this job. And it's like, well, is your job managing a Best Buy what you want to do? Or do you want to be a creative person? I mean, sure, making $60K a year when you're young is cool, but so is sleeping by a river and, like, dumpstering bagels from the best bagel shop in Ithaca, New York. And I just think that it's important to be afraid and uncomfortable if you want to be true to your artistic self. Mm-hmm. I can hear all my friends making fun of me for all what I just said. But
All
No,
right.
but I admire Sam's guts though, especially as someone like me who has like total performance anxiety. Like I actually am like so in admiration of both of you as, full on performers for what you do. But at the same time too, like, in Sam's book, like it's what I love too about the sort of these gritty characters is that there's so many moments of poetic beauty in the book as well. And so for me, it was like, also as satisfying as reading poetry, so yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I'm so thrilled.
That's very kind and flattering. Thank you, Monica.
All right, I'm going to try to sort of draw this all together here at the end here. I think, one of the things we can take away from seeing these two wildly different artists in conversation is the importance of sort of creative hubris, that you need to believe in yourself and at an almost psychopathic level, which is to say that, all this gulf, the infinite library of literature that has come before me is incomplete without my contribution. And I know that there are 7 stories and they've been told an infinite number of times. Nobody's told it like I'm going to tell it. You need to hear what I have to say. Being open to influence across genre, saying, I'm going to take, this alto saxophone playing, and this is going to go directly in my work. I own it. It belongs to me. This world is mine. It goes into my art. You need to hear it. If you hear it and you don't get it, it doesn't mean it's not good. It means you don't get it. The validation you need to be able to have a direct relationship with your own work and your own insecurity, and look at the thing that you've created and say, this is good. If nobody else sees it, I saw it and I know that it's good, and just sort of, and have that confidence to keep going, to put one foot in front of the other, to keep putting the words on the page, to keep sending out after you've been rejected a million times, just to keep hammering away. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. You guys, thank you so much for this. This has been awesome. And I can't wait for it to go up on the archive, to be able to send it out into the world, because it's so important to me right now to just encourage people and let them know that life is still possible. Art is still possible. Hope is still possible. So thank you both very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Mishka.
Yeah, this was a pleasure. Thank you both.
And hopefully one day we'll meet up for dumpster bagels.
Oh, yeah.
No, we're rich now. We don't need that.
We'll fill a dumpster full of bagels. All right. Thank you guys so much.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Take care.